My superpower is engineering. I've been a roboticist almost all my life now. I think engineering is just as creative as the arts. Engineers, we solve problems. It impacts the world. It makes a difference. Without IEEE, I don't think I would have the network that I have. Anyone can get involved with IEEE USA at any time. There's an immense amount of value for anyone at any career stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's IEEE USA Livestream webinar. I'm Corey Ruth, Media Relations Associate with IEEE USA, and I am going to be your host for the next 60 minutes. IEEE USA's goal is to create programming that's valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. We'll be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love to get your feedback. Your opinions will help us to inform future programming, so we'd really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts. I'm so excited to introduce our presenters for today, including Dr. Terrence Yeo. Dr. Yeo is a scientist at FTS International, a company that provides independent analysis and mission support services. Dr. Yeo has a variety of roles in systems engineering, R&D, portfolio management, program management, and corporate strategy. He's an IEEE senior member, has a passion for creating technology, holds 11 patents, and recently published a book titled The Ultimate Upgrade. Joining him today will be Lindsay Enders. Lindsay is a computer engineering student at the University of Utah and a systems engineering intern with L3Harris. Previously, she was an accountant and owned her own business, providing financial support and insights to other small companies. Lindsay also has a degree in psychology with a minor in philosophy and has always been interested in personal development and well-being. And without further ado, we will pass the stage over to Terrence and Lindsay.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Corey, for introducing us. Super excited about today's presentation. It is part of a five-part series. We're number 3 of that five-part series, particularly the Ultimate Upgrade, Essentials, Finding Your Path. The first 2 that we had was about improving your abilities, your capabilities, streamlining your workflows so that you are able to jump those S-curves and be able to do things orthogonally without overtaxing your mental capabilities. The second one was looking at your MBTI SWOT, fusing those things together and allowing us to get an understanding of how to stretch ourselves. And I don't know if you've been able to do that in the last couple of weeks or so, but I've been trying to meld myself and become less J, more P. And also be more sensing rather than looking at my own internal world and following off of those intuitions. And that's actually been the struggle. Most of the time you only want to do one. I've been trying to do 2 at the same time, but it's also very good to just strengthen those muscles and flex those things. Well, now we're going to put them all together. Now we're going to take both your capabilities and all the techniques that you have, and then adding that to that, knowing yourself, and then moving that to finding your path. And finding your path is really the way to engineer your career, to really take apart that engine, put it back together, and then drive it and get it to that point. And in order to facilitate that, we have a really, really special guest here, Erin Lindsay Enders. Erin has the great capability of having 2 names, and so we always never know how to introduce her. But she's Lindsay to us now, and you'll hear part of that journey and part of that way of things. And when I first met Lindsay, she was Erin, and it was at the IEEE Rising Stars Conference. The IEEE Rising Stars Conference is a conference that happens once a year in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's a really great conference. We met last January, right at the middle of the pandemic, when there was not a lot of things going on. We had it all virtual for the first time. And so we've met virtually, way back when and exchanged a couple emails. Back then you had a very, very interesting story and wanted to draw that out and see where that progression came to today. So Erin, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Awesome. Well, thank you for the introduction, Terrence and Corey. Also, thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited to share my path with everyone here. Obviously, I've had kind of an interesting path. I am currently an engineering student at the University of Utah, but I started in psychology with a minor in philosophy and then somehow became an accountant. So I've gone through a lot of changes already, even though I'm still pretty early in my career. But I like to think that these have actually been really useful things for me on this path so far, because I've learned a lot of really important skills throughout all of these journeys and things. And I might have not taken a very straight path and it's been quite curved, but I like to think that that's going to help me be a better engineer in the future, and also just help me get more out of my career and out of my life in general. Careers are part of our lives for quite some time. It's something that we all have to do and that we spend a lot of time in. So if we can kind of make the most out of it, we can get a lot of joy and other benefits from it, including meeting some really wonderful people such as Terrence here. IEEE Rising Stars event was a really great opportunity for me to not only build my career and get some more exposure in the industry, but it was also a really great way to see where the industry is going, what opportunities are out there, and really think outside of the box. And at the end of the video today, we're going to introduce a little bit more about the IEEE Rising Stars event that is happening again in January 2023. And I really encourage you to take a look at it and see if you're stuck in your career or you're looking for some different opportunities. That might be a really great place for you to get some inspiration.
Thanks, Lindsay. Your story is just so amazing and also encouraging, and that's why we're going to draw it out. And that's part of that interview and part of that process. And how we're going to do that is through the hero's journey. And I mentioned that in the previous presentation, the hero's journey, in the sense of your hero, you're the hero, and other people may be your enemies, but they're also their own heroes, and you may be their enemies. But we're going to talk about the hero's journey itself and how that relates to you. And typical hero's journey, Joseph Campbell talked about the monomyth, where a lot of the stories that we see around in the world are based upon that. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And it starts off with a call to adventure, seeing somebody in the Shire who's seen, that's all they've seen in their life, but they think there's something else out there, drawing into supernatural aid that draws them out of that Shire. They cross that threshold of unknown, from the known to the unknown. And then from there, they're helped and mentored to a point in which they face these challenges and temptations. And during that time, they fail. And they reach that abyss, that place of death and rebirth. And through that, there's a transformation. There's atonement for past sins, for past wrongs, and then a return from the unknown back to the known. And that's usually given through a gift from outside, and then that return and that understanding. And we're going to bring you through that process, and I'm excited to hear your story from an accountant, and how you went from that portion of your life into computer engineering. So Lindsay, let's start off with that call to adventure. And you're a car aficionado, and that's something that we connected with since I love my Mustang and I've been working on it. But you've really upgraded this vehicle, and that's really a great metaphor for your life and how you've used all the capabilities and tools thus far. So share with me your call to adventure into engineering.
So I obviously started as in psychology, and at that point I hadn't really gone into industry yet. So I kind of had this ability to, explore and do some things. And at the time, accounting just seemed like it was a really interesting field. For me personally, one thing I realized is that, from my own personal analysis, SWOT analysis and stuff, doing math, crunching numbers, doing these things was kind of intimidating to me, but it's something I really wanted to get better at. And so I had this opportunity to be trained to be a bookkeeper by a CPA at first, and then just spend a little bit more time in the finances. And that really seemed like a beautiful opportunity for me to grow and work on some of the things that I was really interested in improving on for myself, and get to know myself a little bit more. So that is kind of how I transitioned from, studying psychology at first. And I was in school and working another job at the time that kind of gave me this opportunity. But I really started to grow into accounting, and I really at the time loved the opportunities it was giving me. I started with construction accounting, and then I've also done working in like a typical CPA firm. I started my own business after seeing there were some gaps in the market with certain kinds of like small businesses, specifically subcontractors within the the construction field, they definitely needed a lot of guidance there. So I explored all these avenues of accounting, and I really, at the time, enjoyed it. But after several years of doing it, I kind of realized that it was lacking the diversity I really wanted, and it was lacking some of the challenges I really wanted as well. And I feel like I had grown a lot. I had gotten all these experiences with, learning how to interface with clients, learning how to just problem solve, looking at things from different perspectives, and just looking for opportunities out there. But I think I started to realize that while at the time this was a really, really great opportunity for me, I had already kind of outgrown it in a way, and I had learned more about myself in some sense, and I really wanted to look at other opportunities. So it started as this just little idea in the back of my head of, I want to go back to school, but I don't know what that looks like yet. I think I really do want to have a career change, but I don't know what it looks like yet. So I'd started with this just inkling of ideas, and considering, doing another SWOT analysis. Where am I now? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my opportunities? What do I really want to work on? And where can I go from here? So it really just started as this idea of realizing that there was more opportunity out there, and I had more strengths at my disposal now, and I felt like I could explore more of these paths that maybe seemed like they were off limits at first. And that's kind of how this call to adventure really started. And through just more experiences, I was able to kind of see this was going to be a good opportunity for me. And not only that, but kind of get some guidance into like the direction I wanted to go. I originally loved CS back in the day, but didn't feel confident enough in myself to do that. So I really kind of took a step back to look at my interests again and see, okay, so what are some possible paths that I'm interested in that I think I could feasibly do, given where I am now. So it really started with that idea.
So let's break that down. So there was a point in which you really grew into your preferred path or chosen path, and then you start to see the boundaries of that path, and boundaries of where you were, and you said, no, there's something more out there. And it sounds like you were trying to scratch that itch there. There was an inkling that you then progressed into saying, what does that look like? What would that be? And then CS was one of those things, computer science, that you've always thought you wanted to do, but you felt like you were not ready for that. Yet, going towards accounting, even though you had a psychology degree, you're already moving towards that, right? Excel is a kind of right, it's really close to programming. I mean, there's a lot of great programming skills that can be learned and also executed on an Excel spreadsheet. And the best part is that it comes default with Microsoft, right? So I've seen many an amazing tool being made with Excel that would take much longer with just programming. So you saw that, you already had those inklings, and then you started looking around to that. That's really interesting. Can you share a little bit about possibly some of the supernatural aids that were parts? In this case, you're driving with a bunch of S2000 cars and other people. Did you have that moment as you were transitioning and making that leap?
Yeah, so I think after I was more open to the idea that maybe I want to go down a different path, because I think the first thing that we have to do is be open to the ideas to really start to see what those opportunities are that are out there. Otherwise, I think we kind of tend to wait for the perfect opportunity, but reality, there's not really a perfect opportunity. So as soon as I started opening my eyes a little bit to it, I started to see these opportunities kind of fall into place and these options open up for me. And then also what I started to see in some sense were things that were really showing me that this accounting path I was on really wasn't the path I wanted to continue on. Just having some issues that were, typical issues that might occur. But I think at the time I realized I didn't want to continue going down this path, and especially when I was seeing some of these other things. So I had a really big move to Utah in the middle of this whole thing and I was like in the middle of looking, do I want to go back for accounting? Do I want to continue on this path? Do I want to just focus on my business? Do I want to try and focus and work on like in a CPA firm? I had all these questions that I wasn't sure about. And in the middle of this, I ended up moving from Virginia to Utah and having this whole fresh new start and fresh new opportunity, I think really gave me that perspective. But that ability to move to Utah was kind of something that really came out of the blue. And I looked at it as an opportunity to just really start fresh and see. And so I would consider that to be kind of like a supernatural aid that occurred, just that opportunity to move and really shift my perspective and then really put more things into perspective. about where I wanted to go. And when I did move to Utah, once I got here, I actually did work in a CPA firm and continued on that path a little bit, obviously, because it takes time to figure out some of these things. So that's pretty normal. But I took that time to kind of figure out, how did I want to get on my feet here? What did that really look like? And I just started to get more opportunities. Like the University of Utah is literally right here. So that was just something that was very convenient. They had a good program. They had things I was very interested in. And so I went and explored some of these things, and there just seemed to be a lot that was out there that I was able to find that kind of helped me along in this path. And I think sometimes when we're able to start looking at these opportunities and it feels like, wow, these things are working out, it really kind of helps encourage us to continue down those paths. And I do feel lucky in that I was able to have things that kind of popped up that helped encourage me to go back to school.
But that's really, really good that you highlighted that you had opportunities that you weren't expecting that showed up, and you grasped those opportunities. You made those opportunities real. You took a big move out, and I had those same experiences, both from moving from my first company, the company that I started with in the beginning of my career, to another company, and really leaving the friends and the great work and the great life that I had there for that unknown. And when you move, you're also thinking, I'm going to go along that same path. Maybe this was the location. You move locations, but you're bringing not only half the problem with you, but also half the solution. And that solution is that thinking mind and saying, is this a right fit? So it's interesting that you went to something very similar to what you had before. Practical reasons, of course, but also to test to see if it was the location that made the difference. And I had actually that very similar experience. I moved from one management strategic viewpoint to a management position, and started to think over those things and saying, is this the right delta? Is this the right move? I moved mostly for family reasons, to be closer to family, because I was commuting across the city, using up about 2 hours round trip every day. And that was good, that was helpful, but it also didn't scratch all of those itches. And so it's a similar path, and you still had a lot of help throughout that point. And there's also a lot of questions that come through in your mind, I'm assuming, throughout that period. And if anyone in the audience has any questions, we will have a question and answer period in the middle of this cycle. So please do put down any of your questions, and we'll be happy to answer it then. But in terms of your questioning, what happened next in terms of crossing into that threshold period?
Well, one thing for me was that I just had so many questions and so many unknowns, but it went both ways. It was like, okay, I have this maybe potential opportunity to go back to school, really consider this as an option, do a complete career change or pivot. But also you have the question of, well, what if I continue it on with accounting, and maybe there's another job out there that I absolutely would love, or maybe I'll get a better client that I really enjoy working with, or, and I think there's just thousands and thousands of questions, and we have the tendency to kind of doubt ourselves, and then, be in this kind of fork in the road where we're like, well, which way do we really want to go? And so what I did is really lean on some of those self-assessment tools, and also my psychology background kind of helped me take the time to self-reflect and do self-assessment to kind of go, okay, let's look at the long term here, because it's easy to look at the short term and be like, well, this isn't what I want, because this isn't like, where I want to be. But most good things take quite a while to really come into fruition. And so if we take that short term and really just look and see, well, what does the long term actually look like? And I knew that I had already kind of been feeling like accounting wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I figured that if I continued this path, there's always the opportunity and possibility that I would find something I really enjoy. But would that be something that would stick with me for my whole career? Would this be something that I would enjoy in the long term? Would this always be something I enjoy? And I couldn't answer those questions. So then I started to really explore, well, if I go back to school, if I look at something CS related, what are some of the topics I'm actually interested in? What would I actually want to study? What are the opportunities there? And taking that time to really look at my strengths and weaknesses and see where I wanted to go, I was kind of able to determine, based on just my own personal interests and my own personality and my own strengths and weaknesses, what would probably be a fulfilling career for me. And I realized that I am someone who gets bored very easy. I love technology, I love to challenge my brain. And I realized that any tech field would probably be a very good fit for me in that way, because I would always be getting that satisfaction of really challenging myself with hard problems and really pushing myself to learn these things that are very difficult. And so I started to really just explore what is out there. And that's actually how I ended up on computer engineering at the time. So I had started, and I loved CS, but I felt like there was something kind of missing. And so I realized I wanted more of the full scale understanding of like hardware to software. So I dove into computer engineering. And once I looked at what all computer engineers can do, and then also kind of some of their typical career paths and just the opportunities there, I got really, really excited about that. So I think some of that excitement that I had really kind of helped me get through that threshold of figuring out, okay, where do I want to go? Do I really want to go here? You know, there's always questions and doubts, but that excitement and also just really considering the future is what helped me get over that threshold, because that threshold is temporary and, you know, it's something you're going to go through. But if you can look at the bigger picture, I think it can help you keep moving forward. And that's really what helped me in that case.
So that's a really key point that you mentioned, that there's a gap, right? You see the gap. We all see that gap, and we say, how can we get from point A to point B? And in order to get to that point, you don't look at the actual gap itself, or how far it is, or how wide it is, or how deep it is. You look at point B and say, is that a place worth for me to go to? Whatever cost it takes to get there, am I willing to take that cost? And am I willing to fall down into that gap as part of that cost? And I think that's where I think that leap of faith, right, can come in metaphorically, where you're really leaping with your own strength, knowing fully that you're not able to get across without help, without education, without mentors. And throughout that process, being able to then get to a point of clarity and of truth. Can you share a little bit more, just a little bit more about that, in terms of getting, what made you make, like, what happened in order to get across that? Did you just apply for school? What happened?
I kind of had an experience at work that I just really wasn't super pleasant for me in some sense. I know it's pretty typical that we have reviews and whatnot. And I kind of realized after this review that I had that some of my strengths and things that I knew I had weren't valued really in this circumstance. And it made me think maybe the way that I'm applying my skills doesn't necessarily, like, maybe it just doesn't have that much of an application to some of these things that I'm doing. And I can't really express them the way that I want to express them. And I can't build on them the way I really want to build on them. So I think after that experience, I also kind of took and was like, I want a place where a lot of my strengths and weaknesses and things I can not only work on, but also, you know, have them develop and continue to grow. And I started to realize, I guess, after that experience, that I was going to be limited in the ways that I didn't want to be limited. So after feeling like I hit not only just a boundary, but like a pretty hard wall, that kind of made me go, okay, maybe I should look at something else. So it wasn't actually very long after that I applied to school. And so that was kind of, I guess, the catalyst in that sense, was like a very hard, like, maybe this isn't it for me.
So in that, it's also confirmation, right? So from the perspective of you going through that process, it was a hard response, a hard wall. But looking backwards, it's a catalyst. It's the confirmation that this was the path to go. And so making that leap now becomes a necessity rather than an option, right? That's really great. So let's move on. So now you've taken that next step. You've jumped across that gap, and you find yourself in a period of being outside of the known into the unknown, and being now trying to work with what your current tool sets were. Can you describe a little bit of that, the time of challenges and temptations?
Sure. So one of the biggest things, and you know, psychology really helped guide me through some of these things, just understanding a little bit about how humans respond in different situations. I knew going into this that it was going to be a very big change and big adjustment, because when you work, your schedule is usually pretty consistent. You have a routine, you have these things that are very predictable. And going back to school really upsets a lot of that. Your routines are constantly changing. Every semester you have different classes, the times change, just your workload is always adjusting. Things are very, very unpredictable in some sense. You don't really know what your day-to-day is going to look like, and your day-to-day for each semester may change. So what I kind of had to do was accept and understand that I knew this was going to be uncomfortable, and being aware of that, even though I can't make the discomfort go away, I just knew that it was going to be there. So I think kind of being a little bit more mentally prepared for that. And then also just really trusting in myself that this was not like a step backwards in some sense. This was a step to the side to go a different way. And I could take some of these things I had learned through my jobs and through my previous experiences to help make this a better situation overall. So one thing that I looked at this as is that, my first degree, I think when most of us go to college the first time, we don't even know about all of the opportunities that exist there. So being able to go back and do it again, in some sense, I felt like, okay, even though I know this is going to be challenging, I also want to consider all of the things I can get out of it that may help me with engineering or may just help me be a better person in general. And so I kind of really wanted to lean on my past experiences, lean on myself and trust in myself that, I had gotten myself this far in life and I had done well and all the, like most of the things I've done. So if I really take the time and I accept that this isn't going to be easy, no matter what, then I can kind of keep that longer term goal in mind and get through some of these challenges. And of course we have, I think one of the things that's harder going back as an older student is that you have less risk tolerance in some sense because you have more responsibilities, you have money, you have all these like pillars that usually when you're 18, they're not really that big of an influence there. But at this time they were. So one thing I did to also alleviate this was just plan the best I could ahead. And of course you can plan all you want and things still don't go according to plan, but at least having a rough idea of how to handle a lot of these things also helped me. So I felt like I had kind of prepared as much as I could prepare, with also being understanding that regardless of how much I prepare, there's still going to be challenges.
I think about your car and a picture of you working on your car. And I mentioned it before when I saw this, when you sent it to me, is that not only do you have these jack stands, but you also have the wheels of your car, the very portions that hit the road that drive you forward underneath you to protect you so that you can work on that car. And I see that as a huge metaphor in terms of what you have done in your schooling. You've really stopped that car, taken off the wheels, and started working underneath it and upgrading it to match what you wanted to have in a vehicle of life, and not just be satisfied with what it was, right? What you bought it as. And I think that's really admirable. That's really brave to be able to go through that and to find yourself in these challenges that you didn't really have to. You could have stayed with the known, and not have to worry about these things. You had a successful business. You knew your niche. You were able to generate lots of clients, and yet you took this turn. So just really admirable of you to make that step in order to really reconfigure that engine of life. As we move forward, as we're thinking through, right, these things, there's always a misstep. There's always something that doesn't go right, and that gets you into the abyss of the story. What is your abyss of this particular part of your life?
I would say there's been kind of a few that have happened. I mean, the pandemic introduced so much chaos in some sense to this path, because you had an idea, okay, I would take these classes, this would happen, blah, blah. And when you're going to school as a normal student, which I had done before, this all made sense. But once the pandemic happened, the way that teaching and online classes were done, everything kind of changed. All of a sudden, I was not in labs anymore getting hands-on experience. I was working from home. I was attending my classes from home. Some things were changed on how they were taught. There were so many just upheavals and adjustments that it it really threw me for a loop. And I thought at first I was going to have to graduate later than I expected. And then the order of my classes changed, and then some things weren't offered. And, I had planned all these things up until this point, and I thought I had a pretty clear path on where I was going, but then there was just a lot of confusion. And honestly, that actually did throw me for a pretty big loop, because I had planned, when was I going to get my internships? When was I going to try and do these things? And one of the things that I just, with this time constantly changing, I was actually kind of behind on when I applied for internships, because I realized that I would probably need to do it this time instead of next summer because of some of these changes. And so I applied in the spring instead of in the fall, when they're usually hiring. I was very lucky in the sense, I really relied on my network, my mentors, to kind of help me with this and figure out, well, how do I, where do I go from here? Is there opportunities? And obviously I think there are always going to be opportunities. You just have to go out and look. And so that was a big kind of abyss for me for this time around. But one thing that really helped me get through this abyss, because, unknowns happen all the time. Before, when I was studying psychology, even before then, when I first went to college, I was actually on a sports scholarship. I was focused on sports entirely. I didn't really pay as much attention to my education because sports are what I had known. I was a pole vaulter, and I did very well at that too. I was tied for the freshman record at my school, and I also got our indoor conference record. And so I thought I was kind of moving along this path of sports were going to be this thing that was really big in my life. I'm not as sure about academics, and I didn't actually have at the time that really strong relationship with myself in terms of knowing how I learn and enjoying learning. But I had a really unfortunate accident where I broke my spine, and that kind of made this really harsh stop to everything. And suddenly I was very much thrown into this abyss, and I didn't know what to do. And it probably took me a year to kind of get out of it, because one, it took me quite a while to heal from my spine, and I was not able to do any movement at that time, really. And that was something that was such a big part of my life. And that was something that I really relied on to feel connected and feel grounded. And I suddenly just didn't have that. And so that's, in turn, now I consider that to be a blessing in disguise, because I got to find out a lot more things about myself that I didn't know I had, a lot more of my strengths, and it brought me to psychology. It brought me into this focus of school and education and that value system. But that kind of just disrupted everything. So in some sense, going through the abyss this time, even though it was still intense and there was a lot of unknowns, I did feel like, at least in some sense, I had a bit more control this time, because I wasn't completely, helpless from that injury. And I had more experience. I had more skills at my disposal. So I had more tools to help guide me through this abyss. And also, again, my network of people really also to lean on helped me at that time.
Wow, that's the incredible experience, and thanks for sharing that. That's something that's shocking, just in terms of some of the pictures you've shown, how active you are, and the recovery that you had from that accident to what you're able to do today. But more so, I think it's the recovery of your spirit, to be able to push past those difficult times and know that even these things now are not as bad as back then. It kind of reminds me of Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, when he hurt his back and he was in the hospital, and he spent his time writing Profiles of Courage and really getting there. There's that point of that abyss that, from that perspective, looks like it's the end of the road. It's over. But now looking back, it's just the beginning, and also an encouragement for you and others as you move forward into the future. And I think that's the beautiful part about our story as people, is that there's the ability to retcon, so to speak, but go backwards in time. The decisions you make in the present actually have the ability to go backwards in time and change all of those things in the past to be something that was ugly once, to be something very beautiful. I think that's something that is an amazing part of the human experience. There is some sort of that blessing that occurs as part of that. It's a mystery. It's a great mystery of life. And it's really encouraging to hear the experiences you have and how that has set you forward into the next steps, into the next area. So wow, that's really great. I think we went through some really, really deep stuff. Let's really take a question and answer break. And if there are any questions from the audience, please bring it together here at this time.
All right. Yeah, just while we're waiting for some questions to come in, and again, you can put the questions right there in the comments box, and our speakers will get to those. I just have a couple questions, maybe while we're waiting for people to type in there. So both of you have gone through major changes, changing companies, changing fields, going back to school. These can be a huge leap of faith. So how would you counsel someone who's considering such a change for themselves? And is there something they should look for? Anything that, is a threshold that maybe it's time for them to make a change, or not, maybe that they should stay?
Well, I'll take that question, Corey. That's a really good question. I think the thing I like to do, and I mentioned that in the first webinar back then, was it's always good to explore paths before it becomes a single string path, the final path that you're going to take. So it's always good to have hobbies. It's always good to try things, to experience things in a way that is safe, right? That allows you to fail successful. So always looking for, I'm going to try this. I'm going to fail. What am I going to get out of it? What is my fail successful mentality of that? So that's what I would encourage, because then you'll find whether that thing that you did scratches that itch that both Lindsay and I have felt. And I know other people who are watching this now have felt that truly there's something in there that's driving you to do something different, to be outside of the known and go into that unknown. And so not to be afraid of that, but to embrace it in little tiny steps here and there until you feel comfortable that you can then look past that gap and jump and make that leap of faith.
Absolutely. I think many of us can relate to the feeling of change being scary, but finding that, making it manageable, it definitely goes a long way to making that happen. Evelyn has a question along those lines as well. That where do you find the courage to make such changes in your life and your career?
So I'll take that question. For me, and I've had a lot of people tell me I'm courageous, but I wouldn't say that that's something I'm really focusing on when I'm making these decisions. Really what I'm doing is kind of looking at the longer term and looking at the bigger picture and kind of staying true to myself and saying, how do I want to live my life? Where do I want to go? What do I find meaningful? And kind of really taking the time for self-discovery to see what are my values and what do I want to get out of this? And I think once you kind of really understand your own values, you can kind of start to look at things and go, this is something that I think supports me and that is a great opportunity, or, this doesn't feel like it's the best fit for me. And that's completely okay to say these things. And I think a lot of times we get into these very boxed in ideas that we only fit on one path, and it's really hard to make these changes. But I think if we can kind of get out of that mental box that we set for ourselves, we can look at some of these other opportunities. And I think another thing we can do is also look for inspiration from other people. If you're interested in engineering, but you're not entirely sure about it, there's definitely a lot of opportunities out there for you to kind of get a little bit more exposure. For example, we have all this IEEE support. There's a lot of stuff there that you can look into and you can kind of find some inspiration. I think inspiration can sometimes take the place of courage in some sense. Courage makes us seem like we're making, doing all these big things and heavy lifting and all the strength, but inspiration can kind of do the same thing. So really taking the time to find these bits, and also just look for mentors, look for, talk to your friends, just talk to people and say, this is something I'm interested in. And I think they'll also be very supportive of you. So you can kind of create a support group to really help you for these changes that you're interested in. And they can start as a small idea, and, they don't have to be this fully formed thing at first. You can start small and kind of build up from there.
Yeah,
I think
sorry, go ahead.
Just jumping off of that, Corey, is that you can also do that big leap in micro steps. specifically saying, I can always go backwards to my prior life. If I don't really like what I'm seeing, I have that as a fallback. And I think that's the beauty of encouraging an increase of skills rather than decrease, especially when you're doing orthogonal skill sets like you, Lindsay, from psychology and accounting, actually from physical, what's it called? It would be kinesiology, right? To accounting and psychology, and now to computer engineering, right? Those are very orthogonal skill sets. And from each of those, you can go backwards. And then the great part is you can not only go backwards, but you can also then fuse those into areas that not many people have those interdisciplinary. So I think finding the courage is being curious and being focused on satisfying that curiosity in a way that gives you more understanding of what you want to do and where your path is.
Great. We've got another question here. This one's from David. He says, you've overcome a lot of challenges and kept moving forward. Do you have any tricks to keep you motivated and avoid getting overwhelmed?
So I do want to say that being overwhelmed, I think, is a completely normal experience. No matter how experienced you are, there's going to be times where we still feel overwhelmed, and that's kind of part of it. But the main thing is that we don't give into it and just give up because we feel overwhelmed. There's going to be times where, there's a lot on our mind, we have a lot going on, and it can seem like, well, why did I do this to myself? Because now I just feel so inundated with all this stress and other things I just don't know. But that's where you really can lean back on, what do I want to get out of this, and what have I done already, and what have I gotten out of this already, and kind of look at the bigger picture again. I think I definitely had this experience already with school, just because, as it turns out, there's some difficulties when you have an already existing bachelor's degree, and then you get another one. Sometimes that creates some limitations for you in terms of your ability for funding or support in other ways, and that was really, really stressful. And if I really just kind of focused on that, I probably would have just stopped school entirely. But what I kept in mind is that I'm already doing really well. That kind of opened an opportunity for me to look at scholarship options, and I actually got my first engineering scholarship in around pandemic time, and that was a really big encourager for me at that time. So I think just taking a step back, making sure we take time to come back to ourselves, do things we enjoy. So hobbies, lean on your hobbies, and then get your mind off of this thing and then come back to it again. Sometimes we can make it a little bit more digestible, but also we don't need to swallow this whole thing at once. It's really one bit at a time, as kind of Terrence was saying. We can do micro steps forward. So I think if we're overwhelmed, it's usually because we're looking at probably all the stress in something and not necessarily considering all of the good that's also there. So if we kind of adjust our mindset and perspective, I think that can really help us.
Awesome. Well, we'll have an additional question and answer period at the end. So everyone, please keep posting your great questions in the chat, and Terrence and Lindsay will try to get to them towards the end of the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Corey. So let's move on. Let's go into the concept that's next, which is transformation. So share with me that spot. So you've now gone through school and you're in that point of transformation from your prior career into a new one. What's that looking like?
So this is an interesting one. I think one of the hardest things about going back to school in particular is that, it can take, depending on your degree, it can take 4 years before you really start to feel that transformation. But for me, what really, I think, helped me realize that I have made that transformation and I have bridged that kind of gap and that abyss was when I got my first internship opportunity. And I've actually been working with L3 Harris for a year and a half now. And but just having that kind of realization that all that hard work I've been putting in, all that time, all that effort, sometimes it feels like it's not really accumulating to anything because you don't have some sort of outlet for it. You don't have your engineering job yet. You don't have your degree yet. You don't have these things. But there are smaller ways that you can kind of look and see. And for me, once I got that internship, it kind of put into perspective that, wow, not only have I done this work, but it's actually paying off. I'm starting to really see that I'm moving into this new career path. I have the skills to be I guess in this case, a systems engineering intern, but soon to be a full-time engineer here in December when I graduate. But all of that hard work I put in, and that, delayed gratification, that delayed reward started to come into effect. And for me, it's really empowering feeling, not only because it's like I just I put my life on hold. I say hold, but I did stop my career for a few years to go back to school, to develop my skills, to do all these things. And sometimes it can feel like, is this really going to pay off? And so once you finally kind of start to see the effects of the transformation, it is really empowering. You're like, I did this. I did the work, and it's paying off, and I'm getting to grow. And it's been really exciting. And so another transformation for me is that I graduate in December, and I've actually already been extended a job offer from L3Harris, which I accepted, for a full-time employment position. And even though I'm still kind of, in some sense, accepting that, wow, I'm an engineer, even though I've been working as an engineer for a year and a half, it's still exciting to me. I still feel very new, but also I feel very empowered, and I feel like my hard work has paid off. And it is an interesting feeling, because I think logically, as you're going through the semesters and stuff, you are making progress, but you don't really feel the effects of that tangible progress until you actually get to take it and apply it. So really being able to work in my internship kind of helped me see, like, wow, I'm moving on. And obviously this transitioned into a job offer. So I've already started my career in some sense, because I've got the experience already that I'm going to take and continue to build on once I start full-time here in December.
And that's a huge thing, and congratulations. An internship is a very important part of one's career, especially in the engineering fields. I'm seeing that time and time again with those that I mentor, and also as to find mentees, try to create internships for new and up-and-coming engineers. Because that's so crucial. I found that that's the one thing that gives you that leg up. You don't want to get to a point in which you've graduated and then on your resume there's no internship there. If you can do it, have a different internship for every year that you have in between. Those are things that I think are very practical, but also very important. It's something that gives you that broadness and also that network. You may not work for this particular employer, let's say from your first or second internship, but you have that network, and they know how your work ethic, they know how you think, they know your experience, and that is such a great thing in terms of those next steps, because you're building that network while you're in school. So that's really great, Lindsay, that you're able to find one. I know we exchanged some emails during that dark time in which you were trying to find one and weren't able to, and you leveraged some of the Rising Stars folks to get some of those interviews together. And it's really great to see that transformation, and that's really great. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next part, which is atonement. So you touched upon that a little bit in what you said earlier in terms of, was it worth it? Was it worth all of the challenges and the temptations and going into that abyss during that period of time?
100%, it's worth it. And I'm saying that too, still kind of being in this process. For me, I think this was a no-brainer, obviously, knowing what I know now. If we had, while in the abyss, it's easy to be like, I'm not sure. But I find now that what I'm really looking forward to is my future. I think there's so much opportunity there. I'm really excited about this start. I'm not graduating and kind of being sad that I'm leaving school. I'm actually graduating, and I'm really looking forward to the future and what I can bring into it. And also, I'm excited because I've kind of realized that I'm not just separating from all my past paths, and they're not just being left on their own. I'm actually taking these skills and they're coming with me, and I can use them to make me a more diverse, more applicable, just give me more opportunity and more ability to problem solve and tackle what comes in the future. And I think now it makes me feel like I have more ability to adapt. I have more ability to problem solve. I have more ability to handle whatever comes my way. So I feel a great deal of excitement for the future, and that is 100% worth it to me. And I know this is going to just give me opportunities not only in work, but also just in my own life, because I like to tinker and do all sorts of things. It kind of just opens the door for me to really explore and do things I'm excited about, that I enjoy doing. And I 100% believe this has been very, very worth the experience, even though it hasn't been easy. And for sure, there have been a lot of things that have come my way, a lot of hurdles, lots of just issues. At the end of the day, knowing that even though the path that I planned didn't quite get followed exactly, but knowing I still got to my end point is really, really rewarding for me. And it also just, it gives me a lot more confidence in myself to know, like, I can tackle whatever comes my way. And I think that's going to be something that really helps me in my career moving forward, because problems are inevitable, but what we can control is how we respond to them.
Absolutely. I think the control that we have is crucial to, again, take what we have in the present and project that into the past experiences and make that something that is completely fulfilling. Because you can have the same experiences and from the present have a negative perspective on that and make all that you had sacrificed for worthless, right? It's very interesting how it really is part of our spirit, that our spirit really needs to have that positive, joy-filled portion of our lives, need to know that and not be dependent on the individual experiences, but in terms of looking back and seeing that. And I've gone through a lot of hardships through this process, not just moving, but within each of my jobs and the career. And there was always a question, you've taken a huge cost in all of these steps. And sometimes they're negative costs. They're not actually positive. I haven't gotten more of one thing. It's less of a good thing. Was that worth it? And in the big picture, it is worth it. That's what I see, because it helped other people. It was able to slingshot others into greatness. It allowed us to enjoy something very special. That's what humanity is about. It's not just an island of one. It's really a community that, and in our case, for IEEE, I always stress this at every webinar, we are developing technology for humanity. And so the technology we develop, whether it is hardware, software, kinesthetic human interactions, or our minds, we're doing that for humanity, not just ourselves. So we're going to go and talk about the return. Talk about the return back from that mountain into the present, into the near future for you, Lindsay. So what does that look like, and where are you going to see? You're going back into the workforce. You're going to be looking at life in a slightly different way, but maybe the same. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so obviously return is kind of something I'm in the middle of now, and that's kind of in the process. This is my last semester at the U. I start my new position, or official job at L3 in December. And for me, this is really an exciting opportunity, because not only is it the chapter one of me really starting this new career path, it also really opens up a lot of opportunities, because I've learned a lot about myself on this journey. I've learned a lot about my values. I've learned a lot about what I want to do with just other aspects of my life. And I have spent these 4 years or 3.5 years in this career change path, going back to school and doing all these things. And this has been a really wonderful opportunity. I'm super excited career-wise. I have a lot of excitement. I have a lot of joy. I have a lot of just positive feelings about this. But another thing is that I'm excited for the fact that I kind of go back to some consistency with my schedule. I get some more of a routine again. And now I would like to actually, once I do start working full time, I look forward to having more time to invest in hobbies again and be able to go explore. I live in Utah and I love the outdoors here, but it's been kind of hard as a student and also working as an intern to balance those opportunities. So I really look forward to having more balance in my life again and being able to go back into the great outdoors, do some more snowboarding. As you see, I'm coming down the mountain in the return picture, do some more climbing, do some more of the exploring. Utah has so many beautiful natural national parks, and I would love to just get out and go explore. I've lived in Utah for quite a few years now, I guess maybe like four and a half or so. And there's so much I still haven't explored. So I can, look at those and see what do I want to do in other realms of my life. And now, especially because I have a very solid foundation in my career, I think I feel very, very good about where I'm going, and that my career path not only is something that I enjoy intrinsically through my own growth and knowledge, but it's something that can support me to be the person I really want to be all around. And I'm really excited for that prospect to be able to focus on just everything again.
That's really great, Lindsay. And I think that going back, you see a lot of what you enjoyed, the familiar, but it's different now. You have now a sense of purpose, a sense of focus, knowing that those things that you took for granted aren't really worthless. They're actually very special, and you miss those things. And so being able to reconnect with nature in that way, reconnect with your hobbies, I think will be a really great thing during that time. So I'm excited for you as you step into this, starting this December. And of course, it's a great month to be doing all of these wonderful outdoor activities in the snow. And I'm enjoying that, coming to the DC area. There is an occasional snowstorm, and being able to remember those snow days. And honestly, I really enjoy driving in the snow, not in my Mustang, not in my rear, but in a front wheel drive SUV. But it is a lot of fun. It reminds me of the days when I was growing up. So I want to we're almost out of time. I want to take a moment to talk about Rising Stars and to share some of the experiences we had in that. So I started Rising Stars, I think about 5 years ago. I gave a presentation on AI, ML, back when AI and ML was just starting. And it was in person at the time, and it was really, really great experience. We had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed meeting up with the presenters, as well as specifically the attendees, and really getting encouraged to see their excitement and other things. So I want you to remember that, audience, that there's a place for you at Rising Stars, whether you're an early career, mid-career, or if you're a presenter. They're always looking for great people to be able to encourage and excite new engineers in the field. Lindsay, do you have anything to share about Rising Stars?
I definitely would look into it if you get the chance. I found it a great opportunity for a variety of reasons. For one, you can kind of learn and see, if you are an engineer, what are some of the hot topics that you might be interested in that you could look for opportunities in. And two, it's a great way to grow your network and get experience. So I think it's invaluable having a solid network, and events like that have a lot of ability to interact and interface with people. So it's a really great opportunity for you. And I definitely encourage you. As far as I know, I think they do it every January. So if maybe it doesn't work out this year, maybe consider the next year. You can look for the long term for that. But I do recommend, if you get the chance, to really check it out. And it's in Las Vegas, so that's a pretty exciting place to go visit if you get the chance.
It is. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of lights and a lot of excitement. And also, if you're a student, look into your local IEEE chapters on campus, because they tend to be able to have some funding to get you there, so you don't have to go fully out of pocket to go to these conferences. There's a lot of great resources as a student, and you also have a minimal membership fee that allows you to get access to all of these resources, along with the books that I've been writing. The second book is already out. It came out last week. And the third book, which this presentation is based on, will be coming out soon. And that will be free for all IEEE members as well. So Corey, anytime, feel free to stop us. We're going to go through some ideas and thoughts that we wanted to share if there is a little bit more time. But otherwise, we'll leave it to you.
Sure. Well, we do have one more question from the audience, if you have a moment for that. One Absolutely. Is saying he's just barely starting his engineering career at age 32, starting at NPI, but wants to move to embedded systems, but has found it difficult to find options. So he's just doing this until he finds out what he wants. Do you have any advice, any thoughts for him?
Well, I mean, I think one thing is I took a internship in systems engineering. I did that mostly for experience, because I knew that systems positions usually get a lot of exposure to other positions. And regardless, if you are practicing and working in engineering, getting experience hands-on is going to help you in any way. But my actual job offers for software engineering, because I realized that that was something I really wanted to do after having some of this exposure through systems. I realized, okay, this is something that I'm more interested in. So I think that just you can get and gain a lot of opportunity just and experience from your current position, but never stop looking for those options. You might just need to look at your network and see, do I have what I need in this? Or maybe look and see if there's positions that are online, or just look kind of outside the box for some of these things. But regardless of whether or not you're in your intended field, the experience you're getting will apply and it will help you. So it might just be a little bit of a longer transition than you were anticipating and hoping for. But I think if you continue to look for options there, you'll probably eventually find something that is more in the embedded systems side.
And I wholeheartedly agree. This is actually what we're going to be saying, is that there is no box. You're the box. So if you're not willing to make those steps to learn something new, or be willing to ask somebody whether you could have some time to work with them on that's the box. You're the box. So there really is no box. And I encourage you to seek out, as Lindsay said, colleagues and other people maybe in another company who's working on those things, and pick their brain, get to know what they're doing, and maybe try some of it. There's a lot of resources on the internet nowadays that allow you to explore those options and think about them without even taking a single class and getting paid for it, or paying for a class. You can explore some of those things and bounce ideas off of your colleagues and see where that goes.
All right. Well, thank you so much to our speakers, Dr. Yo and Lindsay. It was really wonderful having you here today. And thank you to our audience for tuning in and asking such great questions. If you want to watch this webinar again, or check out the earlier ones in Dr. Yo's series, you can go to our YouTube channel. That's IEEE USA on YouTube, or check it out from our website, IEEEUSA.org, where you can also find the free the ebooks that are free for IEEE members that Dr. Yo was talking about. And don't forget to tune in for his next one, which will be October 7th, where Dr. Yo will talk about building a culture of mentorship. So I encourage you to check those out. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can make sure to get notified of that as well. And otherwise, hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
I had the coolest job that any electrical engineer could ever have on the ground crew for Solar Impulse 2, the first solar-powered airplane to fly around the world only using the power of the sun. IEEE USA has given me a competitive edge because of their support system. It is so much easier doing something and being out of your comfort zone when you have someone there saying, "You got this." IEEE USA is more than just a network. It's a family.